Run your law firm the right way. This is the Maximum Lawyer Podcast. Your hosts, Jim Hacking and Tyson Mutrux. Let's partner up and maximize your firm. Welcome to the show.
Welcome to another episode of the Maximum Lawyer Podcast. It's Becca, the CEO at Maximum Lawyer, and today we're discussing how to start a podcast. This topic was requested in the Maximum Lawyer Facebook group, and if you have a topic you'd like us to cover, we'd love to hear it. You can text us at 314-501-9260 and just let us know any topics that you'd be interested in us talking about. Let's get started. If there's one thing I've seen in the entrepreneurial space, in general, it's the tendency for people to overthink and overcomplicate the technical side of starting a podcast. And starting a podcast can be a relatively quick and easy thing to do. I will say there's an industry jargon to be learned, but like anything, a few Google searches can take care of that. And it can even be free. It can be 100% free, and I'll tell you how. Today, I'm going to mention quite a few products and softwares in this episode, but don't worry, we'll link all of the products in the show notes. So here are the basics to getting started. How will you record your audio? A few options are using the voice recorder on your phone, the embedded microphone in your computer, or you can purchase an external microphone. I know multiple top podcasters who record on their computers in Zoom and sometimes released episodes calling in from their cell phones. And you know what? The audio isn't great. But you know what else? Their followers want to hear from them anyway. They look to them for friendship, community, and strategic business advice, and that's what they get. While investing in quality equipment can improve your show, content is key. As you progress, you can always upgrade your equipment. The quality of your podcast audio in the beginning will not make or break the success of your podcast, but your content will. Next, what will you record in? Like I mentioned, you can just use the voice memo app. You can use Zoom on your computer, or you can use a software like we use at Maximum Lawyer called Riverside.fm. I don't recommend getting started in Riverside, but it is great once you'd like better local recordings for when you have guests. Simply put, this avoids the final audio recording having it cut out while someone's speaking if they don't have great internet connection or slower internet speeds. Local recordings create a file for each speaker, which also allows for more detailed editing of the final audio. Next up, how will you edit your podcast? Audacity is an open source and free software for podcast editing. I've also heard that you can use GarageBand on Macs. And there are a ton of AI-driven softwares that claim to edit the audio for you. This could be great to play around with if you have extra time, but don't get hung up on it. None of these have truly impressed me yet. They're too new. Though it is extremely convenient to have a software take out the and ums automatically, so you'll have to decide if they're worth paying for. And you can also outsource. You can find editors on places like Fiverr and Upwork. My best recommendation for editors is to reach out to someone you know and see who they use. You can even email us to get connected to our editor if you'd like to see if it's a good fit. My email is becca@maximumlawyer.com. Next, you'll need to write and record your intro and outro. If you're not a creative writer, then ChatGPT will get you a great first version. The intro and outro can change at any time, so don't overthink this. You can also get a very affordable intro from Fiverr with a really quick turnaround time. You just have to send them your script. They will often include royalty-free music in the final product as well. If you're up for creating your own intro, use Google to search for royalty-free music. Once you've recorded your intro and outro, grab your royalty-free music and your audio recording, and then you're going to overlay those in Audacity, and boom, you have an intro. I personally would also fade in and fade out the beginning and the end of your intro music. Next, you can create your podcast cover art. There are templates you can use in Canva, or again, plenty of options on Fiverr for this. Next, you need to sign up for podcast hosting. Here's the thing about podcast hosting. They all do the same things for the most part. So it's all about price and various feature preferences. I have worked with Libsyn, Transistor, Simplecast, and Anchor, which is now known as Spotify for podcasters. Libsyn would be my least favorite. Honestly, I just feel like the user experience isn't that great in it. And then in addition to that, you also pay by the storage amount you upload per month. So if your podcast got longer or if you ended up publishing more episodes, you would end up paying more. Next up is Transistor, and this is what we currently use at Maximum Lawyer. I've also worked with Simplecast, which was fairly similar. It is a paid option, but it has a better user experience than I feel like Libsyn has. And then finally, Spotify for podcasters, which is the free option out of the four. This is where I would have anyone interested in hosting a podcast start. You are not married to your podcast host. You can transfer over a podcast to another host at any time, so do not overthink this step. Next, you're going to record your first episode. Then you'll need to submit the intro episode as episode number 1 in your podcast hosting. This is going to allow you to submit your podcast RSS feed to the podcast directories like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, etc. Not too long ago, you had to manually add your RSS feed to all of the directories within the settings of your podcast hosts. I've seen some automatically do this for you now, so just make sure you check the settings to see if you have to copy and paste it in there or if they've done it for you. It's going to depend on the podcast host that you choose. Out of everything we've talked about today, the truth is there's nothing stopping you from starting a podcast tomorrow for free. Record on the Voice Memos app in your phone, use Audacity to edit, and use Spotify for podcasters to host your podcast. Sure, if you have extra time and funds, you can buy equipment, but if you're overwhelmed with decision fatigue and using these things to avoid getting started, then just start with the free options and add equipment and improvements later. A lot of people start podcasts and find out they don't actually like it. This is a great way that you can get started for free with no risk and invest in your podcast if you decide to stick with it. That's it for today's episode. If you have any questions on this topic, you can head to the Maximum Lawyer Facebook group and ask us any looming questions there. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Maximum Lawyer Podcast. To stay in contact with your host and to access more content, go to MaximumLawyer.com. Have a great week and catch you next time.